Good morning. The November 19th, 2025 meeting of the Board of Estimates is now called to order. For those here in person, please take a moment to silence your cell phones and other electronic devices. For those attending virtually, if you desire an opportunity to speak, we ask that you please keep yourself on mute until the chair recognizes you. When you are called upon, please announce your name and organization and speak loudly and clearly as you present. At this time, I would ask our clerk, Celeste Amato, for any corrections, additions, and noted abstentions for today's agenda.
Thank you, Mr. President. Good morning, everyone. We do have a few walk-ons this morning, so bear with me as I kind of go through this slowly to make sure I catch some of our last-minute tweaks. So this morning, we have no corrections to note on the published agenda. We do have 4 walk-on items this morning. Those are SB 25-14242 from the Department of Housing and Community Development. We have a first amendment to an agreement with HCH Real Estate Company. This is for the Sojourner Place at Park project, and the dollar amount associated with this is $0. We have SB 25-14243, Department of Housing and Community Development. This is a first amendment to an agreement with HCH Real Estate for Sojourner Place at Park. And again, this is also an adjustment to an agreement and involves $0 at this time. We have SB 25-14336 for the Mayor's Office of Children and Family Services. This is a grant agreement with the Family League of Baltimore Incorporated for $1 million, and this is in support of folks who have been affected by the federal government shutdown. And SB 25-14341, this is a second amendment to an office lease with the Maryland Port Administration. Those items will all be on the non-routine agenda this morning. And we have some deferrals to note. First is a correction to a deferral that was read into the record last week. That was SB 25-13957. That was a Department of Housing and Community Development item. It was an emergency procurement to be noted. That item was, we read that into the record as returning to the agenda for this week, but it was deferred until December 3rd, 2025. Again, that was SB 25-13957, and that item will appear on the December 3rd, 2025 agenda. We have one deferral from this week's BOE cycle, and that is SB 25-11364. This was for the Department of Public Works, partial release of retainage for Metra Industries for $329,291.63. This item has been deferred until December 17th at the request of the agency. We have 2 withdrawals to note this morning. SB 25-14047. This is Amendment 1 to a grant agreement with the Federal Highway Administration and the United States with the Federal Highway Administration. This is a $0 item. This was withdrawn at the request of the agency. And we have SB 25-14070. This was for Baltimore City Information Technology, a government charitable gift solicitation waiver for broadband and digital equity. This item was withdrawn at the request of the agency. We have no protests or statements of opposition or support to note this morning. And we have the following items appearing on the non-routine agenda for today. SB 25-14087 for the Department of Audits. This is a biennial performance audit of the Mayor's Office of Recovery Programs for fiscal years ending June 30, 2023 and June 30, 2022. SB 25-14196 for the Department of Planning, Baltimore City Public School System Capital Improvement Program, fiscal years 27 through 32 for $357,500,000. SB 25-13303, Department of Public Works, Amendment 5 to the Memorandum of Understanding with the Northeast Maryland Waste Disposal Authority for $3,500,000. SB 25-13299 for the Department of Public Works, Memorandum of Understanding with the Northeast Maryland Waste Disposal Authority for $7,500,000. SB 25-14242 for the Department of Housing and Community Development, Amendment 1 to a grant agreement with HCH Real Estate Company, Incorporated. SB 25-14243, Department of Housing and Community Development, Amendment 1 to agreement with HCH Real Estate Company, Incorporated. SB 25-14336, Mayor's Office of Children and Family Services, grant agreement with the Family League of Baltimore Incorporated for $1 million. SB 25143441 from the mayoralty for a second amendment to office lease with Maryland Port Administration. SB 25144284, Office of the Labor Commissioner, agreements and wage scales for AFL-CIO, ASME Council 3, and Locals 44, 558, and 2202 for fiscal years 26 through 28. And SB 25148081 for the Mayor's Office of Recovery Programs. This is an interagency agreement with the Baltimore City Fire Department for $219,700. And Council President, just a reminder that we'd like to resequence these. So number 10 will move up to the number 2 spot if you are agreeable. We have the following abstentions to note. The Honorable Mayor Brandon M. Scott is abstaining on SB 25144004, Health Department Subrecipient Agreement with the Johns Hopkins University, and SB 251369, Health Department Provider Agreement with the Johns Hopkins University. The Honorable President C. Cohen has no abstentions to note this morning. The Honorable Comptroller Bill Henry is abstaining on all travel requests and travel reimbursements. City Solicitor Ebony Thompson has no abstentions to note this morning. And the Deputy Director of Public Works, Alan Robinson, is abstaining on SB 25148084 DPW, a travel request for the Director, Matt Garbark. We have also no votes to record this morning for the routine agenda, and that concludes our opening statement. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. I will note that the mayor asked me if this hat was a service animal. And I will remind the mayor and all other board members that hats are not just a fashion item, they are about keeping your ears warm, and that no animals were harmed in the creation of this hat. With that, at this time, I ask for a motion to approve and adopt the opening statement as read by the clerk.
So moved.
It's been moved.
Seconded.
Thank you. It's been moved and properly seconded. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say nay. The opening statement has been adopted. I now direct the board members' attention to the memorandum from my office dated November 19th, 2025, identifying matters to be considered as routine agenda items together with any corrections, additions, abstentions, and no votes that have been noted by the clerk. I will entertain a motion to approve all the items contained on the routine agenda.
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved and properly seconded. All those in favor of approving the items on the routine agenda, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, Mr. Mayor?
I've been waiting a long time to do this. We have to make sure that both the city and probably member of the board understand when we say aye, you have to actually say it out loud.
So we're going to go say aye.
All those in favor of approving the items on the routine agenda, please say aye.
Aye.
There we go.
All opposed say nay. The ayes have it. The routine agenda items have been adopted. Seeing no further questions, we will now move to the non-routine agenda. The first item on the non-routine agenda is the biennial performance audit of the Mayor's Office of Recovery Programs under SB 2514087. This is a request to note the audit. On behalf of audits, we have City Auditor Josh Pash. Mr. Pash, the floor is yours.
Good morning, Mr. President, Mr. Mayor, Mr. Comptroller, honorable board members. My name is Josh Pash, and I am here to present the Mayor's Office of Recovery Programs biannual audit over the effectiveness of controls over ARPA expenditures and subrecipient monitoring. I want to thank the audit team, the MORP team, and Department of Finance who assisted us during this audit. Next slide. I will go over our audit objectives, our scope, our audit methodology, some background, and our findings, and then take any questions. Next slide. Okay, scope and objectives. The assessment, we assessed the effectiveness of controls over the ARPA expenditures. We also looked at MORPs and city agency controls over subrecipient monitoring. The original scope was fiscal years 23 and 22. We extended that scope to fiscal year 2025 because that's where most of the expenditures occurred, subsequent to our original audit period. Next slide. Audit methodology. So the first two, we looked at internal control design. We interviewed key individuals from MORP and conducted walkthroughs to get an understanding of the ARPA program. We identified related risks and evaluated the design of certain internal controls, processes, and procedures related to verifying the allowability expenditures and monitoring subrecipient expenditures. Looking at the design of internal controls, we had no finding. For testing, we judgmentally selected 45 samples for fiscal year 23 non-payroll expenditures to validate whether the expenditures were approved, allowable, and in compliance with the grant agreement, and also in compliance with the agreement with the subrecipient, and that the cost occurred during the period of performance. We had 2 findings related to that. We reviewed all sales invoices in fiscal year 2024 to identify duplicate payments. Next slide. We also traced all obligations to sign contracts or administrative expenditures to confirm that the city had obligated funds by December 31st, 2024. We verified that all $641 million of ARPA funds was obligated before December 31st, 2024, which was the deadline required by ARPA. We did find that there was some documentation issues in Workday, which I will get to in finding 3. We also tested 30 subrecipients to review awarded contracts and subrecipient monitoring. We judgmentally selected 37 samples from 2023 payroll to validate the payroll expenditures were approved and related to the grant activity. And then we tied all 2023 and 2024 expenditures to the report submitted to Treasury and the Federal Clearinghouse for a single audit, and we didn't have any findings for any of those 3. Next slide. Also, we reviewed and analyzed documents not limited to MORP's policies and procedures, ARPA final rule, financial performance reports to the Treasury and City Council, subrecipient reporting from the agencies to MORP and from the subrecipients to MORP, and then MORP's monitoring of those reports, and subrecipient awarded contracts and amendments, and then we looked at Workday invoices and approvals that relate to the ARPA funds. Next slide. Okay, some background on the ARPA program. So the total ARPA funding was approximately $641 million. We received that in 2 tranches, May of 21 and June of 2022, which means that money was sitting in our bank accounts before it was spent. We verified again that the $641 million was obligated before the December 31st, 2024 deadline. MORP was established in July of 2021 to administer all aspects of this ARPA funding. The obligation deadline was December 31st, 2024, and all expenditures are required to be made by December 31st, 2026. Next slide. Okay, more background. Okay, monitoring grant funds. So the city is required to monitor the use of ARPA funds to ensure compliance with conditions set forth in the final rule and other applicable federal agencies. The Treasury's final rule was in place of a formal agreement between the federal government and city, which is usually how grants are handled. And the city is required to make sure that all of the compliance is performed and all the requirements are performed for the federal government for this program. U.S. Department of Treasury oversight. So the Treasury retains the right to conduct monitoring activities, which include financial audits, site visits, and programmatic performance reviews, and then the reporting requirements. So the city must submit to the federal government an annual recovery plan, performance report, and quarterly project and expenditure reports to the Treasury. And in addition, the city has MORP submit monthly reports to the Baltimore City Council. We noted that the city has implemented a robust process for preparation, internal review, approval, and timely submission of all required reports to ensure compliance and transparency. Next slide. Our first finding, audits continues to identify duplicate payments in Workday. We reviewed all sales invoices in ARPA in fiscal year 2024, and also looked at the 45 invoices that we tested in fiscal year 23, and we identified 4 duplicate payments for $336,000. The duplicate payments were made by BSIT, BCHD, BCRP, and MOHS. Next slide. So BCHD and BCRP, they have a list and a tool to track the payments made outside of Workday, and they were able to self-identify the duplicate payments. BCHD received a refund check from the subrecipient, and BCRP offset the duplicate payment against future invoices. MOHS, the vendor identified the discrepancy and brought it to MOHS, and Afterwards, MOHS started tracking the payments beginning in January of 2024. This is tracking outside of Workday. And then the MOHS duplicate payment was used to offset future invoices instead of getting a refund. And then for BSIT, audits found the duplicate payment, and BSIT was, at the time of the audit, currently resolving the duplicate payment issue with the vendor, and they also implemented procedures to identify potential duplicate payments in August 2025, which was during our audit and, again, outside of Workday. Next slide. So when we looked for the causes of this, Workday, which has internal control built in to identify duplicate payments, did not identify these duplicate payments. I'll get into why in the next slide. Supplier invoices numbers are slightly different, and MOHS and BSIT did not have a process to track payments to identify duplicates at the time of the duplicate payment. That would be a process in addition to Workday's identification of duplicate invoice numbers when put into Workday. Next slide. Okay, our duplicate payments. So the first one was BCHD, and we note here that a couple of things. So in the supplier invoice number, we see the supplier invoice first one has ending 2805 was entered by the supplier and ties to the PDF version of the invoice. The second one is an SINV, which is a Workday-generated number, which is created when an invoice is put into the system. And you'll note that the first one, the vendor entered into Workday, and the second one, the agency put it into Workday. And when they put it in, they just used the Workday-generated supplier invoice number instead of the vendor supplier invoice number. For number two, which was for BSIT, you'll note that the supplier's invoice number, as highlighted, shows a difference of by a unit of 1 in the supplier invoice number. And those were both entered by the vendor and were entered the same invoice under two different invoice numbers when they were entered into the Workday system. I just want to refresh everyone that the health department caught the duplicate payments before the audit, and then the BSIT duplicate payment was caught by us. Next slide. Okay, for number 3, BCRP, what I highlighted there was the supplier invoice number has a variation with a comma entered into it, and that's what prevented Workday from identifying it. Both these invoices were entered by the agency. Number 4 is MOHS, and again, you'll see the highlighted number, which is a difference in the invoice number, and these were entered by the agency. Also note that for number 4, the second invoice had two different invoice dates. One that was on the PDF version of the invoice, which was 9/28/23, and one was on the was in Workday as added as the supplier invoice date of 9/22/23, which I will get back to a little bit later. All 4 of these were entered by the agency. Subsequent to the implementation of Workday, as Workday is being built out, the invoices are now required to be entered by the vendor and not be allowed to enter by the agency. Next slide. Okay, so what's the effect? So duplicate payments are a risk to all agencies in the city. We identified the cause of the Workday flagged duplicate invoices based on supplier invoice number, and we see from the previous 2 slides how that was overridden. So the risk is that the city has less funds to pay for other bills, and then also, as we'll get into a little bit later, fixing these errors takes a lot of time for city staff. Next slide. Okay, our recommendation. Our recommendation is to the Director of Finance to collaborate with BSIT to develop solutions to reduce the risk of duplicate payments. Solutions may include, but are not limited to, the following. The first 2 would be preventative controls, which means as the invoice is being entered into Workday, it would be caught. So number 1 is have Workday make sure that the invoice date field matches the attached invoice, which goes back to the last one, which I referred to, that has 2 different invoice dates. One, which is on the PDF invoice given by the vendor, and then one that was entered into Workday. The second one is to flag all invoices with the same amount, same vendor, and same vendor invoice date in Workday. This would be in addition to the control of identifying duplicate supplier invoices and digitally match on other fields than those to make the Workday more robust. I will say right now, I do not know the capabilities of Workday and the capability to do this. That's why the recommendation is for Department of Finance and BSIT to investigate this, and there are other methods that can be used as controls. The last two bullets are detective controls. So these would be used after the fact to identify any duplicate payments. So it is creating a Workday report of invoices by vendor, including invoice date, number, and amount, and then that report would be sent to agencies to review on a monthly basis to identify payments which have been duplicates. So if there's a variation in invoice date, but it's within, let's say, 3 days, if the amount and the vendor invoice number, that would be a flag for the agency to go ahead and dig into those. And so that would be after the fact and would look and possibly catch things that preventive controls in Workday would not. Next slide. Okay, our second finding. Recovered duplicate payments are not recorded in the financial accounting system. So as I mentioned earlier, BCHD, they self-identified the duplicate payment in January and May of 2023. They recovered that duplicate payment, and when they did that, they posted the check recovery as a cash sale. A cash sale is basically a cash receipt in Workday, and it automatically books the cash receipt to revenue. So the amount that we recovered as duplicate payment was put in revenue for our grant and not as reduction in expenditure. So what should have happened is a journal entry should have been made to reclassify the money as revenue and take it out of revenue and then take it out of grant expenditures. September of 23, BAPS caught this. They canceled the cash sale and they replaced it with a customer payment. A customer payment is another method to record cash receipts, and that is one that's tied directly to a customer's account. That is also recorded as revenue, would also need a journal entry to move it out of revenue and to move it out of expenditures. Next slide. Okay, so during our audit, August of 2025, the auditors went and investigated this duplicate payment. We noted that the original expenditure was never reversed, and then we worked with the Department of Finance to investigate the status of this posting. They canceled the customer payment from September of 23. Again, this is occurring in August of 25, and they replaced it with a cash slip crediting miscellaneous revenue. So the original posting was as a cash slip. It was made a customer payment, and now it's being moved back to a cash slip. And then that was posted to miscellaneous revenue. And then in September of 25, the next month, Health Department prepared a journal entry to reduce the expenditures, reversing the duplicate payment. I want to note that all these edits and changes are captured in the fiscal year 26 general ledger. So what's the effect? As I had mentioned, it takes a lot of time. So next slide. So the process took close to 2.5 years and audit's involvement. It resulted in overstatement of expenditures by $282,000 in the fiscal year 2023 financial statements and our scheduled expenditure of federal awards. And then in 2026, when we reduce the revenue and reduce the expenditures, those expenditures are going to be understated by that same amount. So the CFA is part of the single audit. That's our report to the federal government, which reports on expenditures made on all federal programs, and this could lead to a single audit finding. I do want to note that the amount here of $282,000 would not be considered material to the audit of the single audit and would not by itself create a single audit finding. Next slide. Okay. BCRP, again, they self-identified the duplicate payments, and these payments were applied to future invoices. So basically, the payment was made, it was not recovered, and then it was just taken off future invoices. So these invoices were not all documented to Workday. So in the first one, $48,000 was paid twice. The vendor gave us a credit of the $48,000. We received invoice ending in 114 from the vendor for $38,000, and that was just taken against the credit. We received invoice ending in 187 for $5,000, and that was just taken against the credit. And then we received invoice ending in 259 for $6,000. That was partially recorded as that invoice of $2,000 and partially taken as a credit. So, why is this important? Number one is invoice ending in 114. The invoice is not in Workday. Invoice number 241187 is not in Workday, and in 241259 is only partially in Workday. Next slide. Okay, effect. So even though the total amount of expenditures reported in the CEF in our financial system and posted against the grant is accurate, there's a lack of transparency, and this could result in a disallowance of expenditures. So why could it result in a disallowance of expenditures is that when this is audited, whether by our audit team, external auditors, federal government, et cetera, when these amounts are looked for supporting documentation, the supporting documentation for those first two invoices is not going to be in there to validate the $48,000, and the third invoice is going to support the wrong dollar amount for what's posted in Workday. So basically, Workday just has the same supporting documentation, the duplicate payment for both of those for fiscal year '23. So what's the cause? So we talked to the agencies, and the cause we found was insufficient direction and training for recording recoveries and offsets from duplicate payments contributed to the recording of errors. This is not a standard process and was not clear to the agencies. Our recommendation is that Director of Finance develop job aids and train agencies on how to record the cash recoveries from duplicate payments, and also how to record applying the future invoices to offset a duplicate payment. So those basically clarifying the processes so that documentation in Workday is accurate. Next slide. Okay, finding number 3. Contract agreements related to each grant cannot be attached to the Workday grant line item, causing challenges in pulling supporting documentations. So the MORP funding was for $641 million. That is set up in Workday as an award line. Under that award line, there are sub-grants. There are over 100 line items for sub-grants, which make up the entire amount in Workday. And there are over 200 attachments to this award in the Workday system. So the attachments are all attached to the award level, which basically means when you open it up, you see the award level, the award line items, $641 million, and over 200 attachments tied to that. They are not tied to the sub-grant line item, which basically, when you're doing an audit, when you're working at making amendments, you're tracing and making adjustments, you want to find supporting documentation to a subrecipient, you have to look through all of these attachments. Now, GMO had set up a best practice, which would put a unique identifier in the name of the attachment to help that process, and it was noted that not all attachments contain this unique identifier. And just to kind of give another example of how this would be a challenge. So for example, if the city made an amendment to a subrecipient contract, they would have to search the over 200 attachments to find that specific one. And then if there were any amendments made before that, they would have to go through all of those attachments to find it again, which can take a lot of time and then could also lead to missing activity, contracts, et cetera. Next slide. So when we look for causes, so Workday, the system currently places attachments at the award level, and then basically the naming convention, which GMO's best practice, is left up to the agency to put those in and rename those attachments. And then we saw that MORP is not consistently following the GMO's recommended practices for that unique identifier. And our recommendation is for Department of Finance to work with Workday to explore system capabilities. Ideally, there would be an attachment to the sub-award line, the sub-line item, so that when you wanted to make a change, you wanted to look up supporting documentation for a particular agreement, you would see that agreement attached to that one line item and any changes supporting documentation to that, and avoid the hunts. And I will take any questions.
I have a few questions, but I'm going to reserve them until after the response.
I have a question for.
Yep.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. President.
Comptroller Henry.
I'm not going to wait. I want to get two clarifications in here. One was, in the case of in the duplicate payments that you found and were addressing, are these duplicate payments where one invoice was paid more than once, or where a vendor invoiced us twice for the same thing.
You go back to slide 12. Okay, so for the first one, the vendor entered one invoice and the agency entered another one. And then basically the way the system was before Workday was often that the supplier would send in the invoice to the agency and the agency would enter it into the invoice. So in this case, it was basically two people doing the same job.
Okay, so there were two different invoices for the same action.
There was the same invoice, but when it was put into the system, it was put as two different invoice numbers. One was the Workday generated invoice number, and one was the invoice on the supplier's invoice.
Okay.
And then when it was, the Workday generated invoice was put in the place of the field for the supplier's invoice number.
Okay,
So basically, Workday didn't catch that because there was two different supplier invoice numbers.
so let me try one more time I just want to make sure my vocabulary isn't.
I'm not done answering your
Oh,
question.
okay, please, go on.
Okay. For the second one, you see that the vendor entered it twice. And then you also see that the invoice number entered by the vendor is different. One ends in 241 and one ends in 242. We did not identify fraud by the vendor, but we did not look into it that deeply because of, number one, the dollar amount of $1,400, and because that we weren't doing a fraud investigation. So that was entered by the invoice. The invoice PDF also has the two different supplier numbers, and Workday has the two different supplier numbers. So that was two different invoices submitted into Workday.
Okay, so that is definitely not the city's fault.
Correct.
That situation where the vendor entered the invoice twice with two different numbers.
Right,
Okay.
except for catching it.
Right, okay. So, yeah, I can see how that would be difficult for the city to catch. Okay, I got you now. All right, thank you.
And then I will just go to the next slide real quickly.
Oh, actually, you're still answering, so I'll stop.
Okay, so for number 3, there was a minor change. Basically, a comma was entered, both by the agency, and these typos have been seen before. So just the way it's entered, typically invoices like this don't have an invoice number, and they're just basically putting a moniker of the payment, January of '24, estimate 19.
Okay.
Okay.
So, and I think this was from slide 21 that said, not all the attachments contained a unique identifier, which sounds like it might be a similar situation to what you were just pointing to, where if it didn't intrinsically come with a unique identifier, someone just makes one up.
A little bit different than that.
Okay.
So basically, these are going to be contracts, amendments, supporting documentation with the agreement with the subrecipient. So these would have to be renamed by the agency to put into Workday. There's no naming convention that, well, basically, we write the contract. So it's our contract, we're putting in the system, and to facilitate this process, because the Workday limitation of not being able to attach it to those sub-grant line items, basically that would be the agency being proactive to put this moniker in there to compensate for not being able to do it to the, only being able to attach it to the award line item.
Have you found anything in Workday that implies there would be a physical difficulty to the city coming up with a naming convention and enforcing its use through the agencies?
So GMO set that best practice, and I think when the agencies come up, they will talk about kind of how they want to do this. This, I think, was, the agency informed us, is not really ideal, just because you're relying on a lot of people to make that change, where grouping them together in these like sub-line items would just make it more easy and more consistent, and just, basically easier to manage that sub-agreement.
I'm gonna practice my reflective listening there. the best practice as stated by the national organization who does this is not being easily accepted because it's harder?
Well, I don't know what you mean by nationally accepted. GMO is an office in the city.
Our GMO.
Yes.
Wait, so we wanted to do this, but the agent, okay. You know what? I will wait and I'll ask when they come up. Okay.
Okay.
All right. Thank you.
You good, Mr. Comptroller?
Yep.
Excellent. Mr. Mayor?
I'll wait.
Okay.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Board? Hearing, seeing none? All right. Thank you, Mr. Pash. On behalf of MORP, we have Deputy Director Tatum, I believe, somewhere, or Deputy City Administrator Kearney. Deputy Administrator, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Good morning, Mayor Scott, Council President Cohen, Comptroller Henry, and honorable members of the board. I am Shamaya Kearney, and I have the honor and privilege of serving as a Deputy City Administrator and formerly served as the first ever Chief Recovery Officer for the Mayor's Office of Recovery Programs. I do want to acknowledge Elizabeth Tatum, who previously served as Deputy Director, but who is now the Chief Recovery Officer for the Mayor's Office of Recovery Programs. But because this audit occurred while I was the Chief Recovery Officer, I thought it important for me to be responsive. In the absence of centralized grants management, Mayor Scott established the Recovery Office on July 12, 2021, to be the mechanism for centralized tracking and reporting of the $641,170,126 that the city received in American Rescue Plan Act funds. To properly administer those funds, the Recovery Office established its own standard operating procedures for grants management, where the city either needed more robust standard operating procedures or none existed. Since its inception, the Recovery Office has directly executed 127 agreements for ARPA funds to include city agencies, quasi-government agencies, and nonprofit organizations, and has helped manage the subrecipient monitoring process for ARPA grant recipients. Today, I'm here to address the audit findings and recommendations from the city audit, which the cover says fiscal years 22 and 23, but all the way through 2025. Just for the next slide, please. Let me first start off by emphasizing what you do not hear, and this is important. You do not hear issues of waste, fraud, or abuse. I want to repeat that for folks in the front and in the back. You do not hear issues of waste, fraud, and abuse. The findings and recommendations are related to process improvements and grants management citywide, not specific to the Recovery Office. Next slide, please. The auditors found 4 duplicate payments within 4 city agencies totaling $339,969.06, which represents 0.001% of the total expenditures in FY '23 and '24, the years when these payments were made, and which represents 0.0005% of the total $641 million in ARPA grant award that the city received. The auditors recommend that the director of the Department of Finance collaborate with the department, our IT department, to develop solutions to reduce the risk of duplicate payments. The Recovery Office generally agrees with this recommendation. Importantly, for 3 of 4 payments, a payment was not made twice for the same purchase order. Instead, 2 separate purchase orders were created and a payment was made for each purchase order. Since the purchase orders had different numbers, the agency rendered payment. In addition, for 3 of the 4 payments, which is 98%, the city was either reimbursed or the payment was offset, meaning credited, against future purchases. For the final $1,400 payment identified, 2%, the agency expects to receive reimbursement before the end of the calendar year. So importantly, for people in the front and in the back, it is important to note that no federal grant funds were lost, none. For corrective action, the Department of Finance and our IT department, along with accounts payable, will collaborate to review, update, and disseminate existing job aids and assess the feasibility of implementing additional workday controls, and we expect for that action to be taken or to be completed before June 30th, 2026. Next slide, please. City agencies use different methods to recover duplicate payments and did not properly document their actions in Workday. The auditors recommend that the director of the Department of Finance develop job aids and train agency staff on recording cash recoveries from duplicate payments and handling recoveries through offsets to future invoices. The Recovery Office generally agrees with this recommendation. And for corrective action, the Department of Finance will work with the accounts payable to prohibit cash sales using grant work work tags, which prevents duplication of grant revenues, and that action was already completed in May of 2025. In addition, the Department of Finance will create and/or review and update existing job aids for staff on how to record cash recoveries and handle recoveries through offsets to future invoices. The Department of Finance will also provide guidance to city agencies on the appropriate way to post an account for refunds for overpayment or duplicate payments of invoices. And this action step is already in progress. Next slide, please. This finding is specific to organizational preference. The finding is that the required attachments for each of the more than 100 subawards that are organized under the overall American Rescue Plan Act award in Workday, but are not directly linked to the individual subaward lines. For context, in Workday, which is the city's financial system of record, ARPA is one award and each subgrant is an individual line item. So there are over 100 line items and 200 attachments with different naming conventions. The auditor's recommendation is that the director of the Department of Finance works with Workday to explore the system's capabilities, such as attaching items at the grant line item level rather than the award level. The Recovery Office generally agrees with this recommendation. However, it is important to note that a standard naming convention of supporting documentation is a best practice. It is not a requirement. It is important also to note that this recommendation does not note that requested documentation was not provided or was not available. The Recovery Office clearly identifies Workday attachments through descriptive labeling, and award-related attachments are assigned to a specific category. However, for corrective action, the Grants Management Office under the Department of Finance has already coordinated with BSID and determined that this is not an available option in Workday. However, Grants Management will continue to explore options in partnership with the Recovery Office and with BSID. Last slide, or next slide, please. I must always remind our residents of our social media presence. For factual information on ARPA investments, I encourage all within the sound of my voice to visit arp.baltimorecity.gov. Check us out on LinkedIn, YouTube, X, Threads, Instagram, and Blue Sky to get a full understanding of the impact of ARPA funds in Baltimore City. Let it never be stated that you don't know how ARPA funds were used. Finally, in what is likely my last time publicly representing the Recovery Office, I'd like to take a moment of personal privilege to thank the Recovery Office team, past and present, for their tireless work and dedication to the proper administration of these funds, and for delivering on our promise of transparency and accountability. When internal and external parties sought attention and relevance and to sow the seeds of doubt and division over faith and unity, we continue to do the work. When the media opted to misinform, mischaracterize over providing clarity and truth, we continue to do the work. Recovery Office team, I've always told you that in the end, our work will speak for us, and so shall that be. Thank you. I'll take any questions you have at this time.
Thank you. I'm going to ask a few, and then Mayor, and then Comptroller. As always, I do want to thank the auditor and his team for their great work on this audit. This is a complex subject, and I thank you for digging deeply into the details. I will note that our ability to manage federal grants and grants has at times been a concern. I know that significant work is underway to develop systems and processes that will strengthen our capacity to disperse funds in a timely manner and fully account for payments. It's critical that the safeguards recommended in this audit be fully implemented and that they become part of the fabric of our city's management processes and procedures. Accounting for funds is critically important for all of us. Mr. Pash, your audit discusses several specific overpayments you found in a sample of grants, and after a broad review of ARPA funding, how worried should we be that grant overpayments are actually more extensive than you identified in the audit?
For ARPA specifically or citywide?
For
I do want to specify that findings 1 and 2 were citywide findings. They weren't specific to MORP. These findings here were agency expenditures under MORP, but we directed the recommendation to the Department of Finance because it is a citywide agency. The risk is not limited to grant funds. And as for the impacts, our single audit has a number of material weaknesses, which reflects the impact of supporting documentation to support expenditures, which this would fall under.
Understood. And again, noting, as Deputy City Administrator Kearney did, that there was no evidence of any kind of fraud or anything untoward in this. If you could project out, I mean, this is a single audit, it's a snapshot in time, it's a look at a specific set of questions. Would you say, again, that there's more need for investigation into these issues, or is it that this is what it is?
Right. So I wouldn't say this is what it is. However, I wouldn't make an extrapolation to see how big the impact is. So, for example, when we looked at the duplicate payments, we looked at all the sales invoices for fiscal year 2024. So that was all the payments, and then we found these duplicate payments within those. So a large number we tested and we investigated, and the 4 that we found. So when it comes to significance, I couldn't make that assessment right now. That would be a project on its own, and based on the continuing development of how Workday is being used over the past 3-4 years, I couldn't confidently say that doing an extensive review would yield necessarily accurate results, just because how Workday has been, I guess, being configured, tailored over the past 3 years. But I would say that this is something going forward that the city should be able to put in controls to prevent going forward or detect going forward.
Understood. Deputy City Administrator, first, thank you for your work in this role. Thank you also to the team that has stepped in for their work as well. According to the audit, it took some time to close some of the overpayments that Mr. Pash identified, and there may be some overstatement of expenditures on the schedules we submitted. Is there a standard process that we have internally for correcting errors through these type of audit findings?
So the Recovery Office has a standard operating procedure around overpayments. There is not a citywide standard, and so that is something that we've identified and that we've talked about through the course of some of the single audit findings. That also came up as a part of our single audit hearing, some of our grants management practices. So it is something that we'll be working with the Department of Finance to develop job aids and other things to make sure that our staff are fully trained on how to appropriately document in Workday so that we don't find that to be a problem in the future.
Can you just talk a little bit more about the standardization of that process, acknowledging that in MORP there is a process and what it will look like for the entire city?
So I think the Department of Finance is better to be responsive to that, and I think I saw Joanna or someone, if there's someone that wants to address that part, or Michael?
Good morning.
Good morning.
Joanna Mositas, Deputy Director for Finance. And I do want to take a chance on behalf of Finance to thank the Department of Audits. You saw a very complex and detailed presentation, and it really outlines how difficult it is to translate this to language that everyone understands and paint a picture of what was found, and then to DCA Kearney for laying out citywide some of the steps we'll take. In response to your question, I would
Joanna,
say...
can you move the mic slightly closer to you? Just
Sure.
pull it
Sorry,
in
I'm short.
a little bit.
In response to your question, I would say that we are working actively. I think there are processes citywide in place. I think the difficulty is with a ship this large and with this many end users, as we'll call it, people in the agencies who are doing the work and responsible for entries and reviewing, as well as in the Bureau of Accounting and Payroll Services. What you find, and accounts payable, what you find is with each staff transition, with changes in leadership, and with transitions to new systems, you are inevitably in need of looking at your processes, and that's why we talked, or you heard reference here, some discussion of the processes that need need to improve, and this being a process issue, and then clearly identifying for each stakeholder in that process, what are the expectations? What are the things you do when faced with a duplicate payment? How do you ensure that that amount is credited back? What are the steps you take both in the system and outside the system? So that's the work that we'll be doing over the coming months with our stakeholders, which will include the agencies. Certainly, you heard some reference to the Grants Management Office. They'll be involved. Accounts Payable will be involved so that we can ensure that from beginning to end, we have a process that everyone understands. Once we have that process outlined, then we'll be using the mechanisms that the city has for training, and whether that's the training that takes place from the Grants Management Office, whether that's the email blasts, and whether that's the forums such as the agency fiscal officer and Workday financial user groups to repeat that training on a regular cadence so that we have positive movement on this.
I appreciate that. I think standardizing our processes, not just in finance, but across agencies, especially as they interact with finance, is critically important so that it's not, so that everyone's singing from the same hymnal, if you will, while you are up there. So I understand that the work is underway to address the recommendations in the audit. I also understand that the target date for completing these improvements is June of next year. Can you explain why it will take that long to implement? That seems a bit long.
Sure. So we're looking at this in the context of a number of things. One, we have a number of stakeholders. So it is not just the Department of Finance, but it is also the agencies and Accounts Payable, as well as BSIT. So we wanted to leave room if there is a technological answer to it, that we have time to review that, implement that, and train on that, and that's the reason for the additional time. My personal goal would be that we move a little faster than that, but we're cognizant that a full and complete solution, may take that time.
Yeah, I mean, full and complete is better than fast.
Correct.
But fast is also important, given the many other things that I know your office and others have to do. Mr. Mayor?
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. Arler, I just want to have you come back for just 1 second. You talked in reference to one of the questions that the president asked. You talked about all of the contracts that you looked at, and you found these 4. Do you know the total amount of contracts that you looked at?
I'd have to get back to you with the total number of expenditures for fiscal year '24.
I'll just take a guess. They're in the thousands, I would say.
Hundreds.
Hundreds of thousands, and we found 4. I just want to point that out for the record for everybody, so
Probably
that we
millions.
millions. That out of millions, there were 4. Just level set us all here today, and then just a quick math. And I think the deputy city administrator said this. Did you all see the documentation to believe that other $1,400 out of the 339 out of 641 million will be handled and kept in the right way before the end of the year?
So that was after the audit period. When we closed the audit, BSIT was working on that. I don't have the current status of that.
Thank you. Deputy City Administrator, do you have this current status for that one, for the remaining 1,400?
Yep, so there is, BSIT is expecting a repayment or reimbursement rather before the end of the calendar year.
And this is your math that I typed in, not mine, but the 339,000 in question represented a 0.0005 of the 641 million of ARPA.
0.0005 of the 641 million, 0.001 of the full expenditures for FY '23 and '24.
Thank you. And then just a follow-up question, because I know that we have the stuff with the council, which I think is great. But then obviously we're talking about ARPA. We're talking about being responsible to the federal government and Treasury in particular. Have we ever had the Department of Treasury before or now have any issues with anything the city has done with ARPA funds?
No, sir.
has the Department of Treasury or the federal government used MORP strategies or asked MORP to show or be examples for how other cities could handle their ARPA funds?
Yes, sir.
That's all my questions for today.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Comptroller.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Can I add one thing?
Oh,
Okay.
Sure.
So, Mr. Mayor, I do agree that the percentage of expenditures that we found was very small. And like I mentioned, this by itself would not give rise to a single audit finding. However, since this is citywide, the risk, both as a process and just being able not to know what we don't know, is high.
No, I understand, and that's why finance is going to make sure that we have that standard practice. And then for you, Mr. President, too, just to say that the June timeline also just a reminder for us all that it coincides with the beginning of a new fiscal year for all of us.
Mr. Comptroller.
Thank you, Mr. President. And I'm going to try to move away from the part of the event that sounds like we're in a procedural and we're cross-examining. It's like I wanted to say specifically to DCA Kearney that the audits department, and I think you understand this, culturally opposes big sweeping subjective statements. They leave that to me. So I am very comfortable saying, and I want to say this to the people in the front and the people in the back, I think you guys did great. Like this is an audit where, and I see every audit twice. So I want to make explicit the fact that there were, to me, uncommonly high number of items that the audit department examined that had no finding. And that's a very good thing when we're auditing a department. But also, all of the items, and you spoke to this, all the items where there were findings really touch on a process that is not MORP's responsibility to manage, but is going to be things that the Department of Finance is going to be working on. So I wanted to be upfront and explicit. You guys did great. I had a question from your presentation, if your presentation can go back to slide 5, I think it was, and make it bigger again so that I can see it. Thank you. Yeah, make it bigger so that eyes that aren't wearing readers can read it. Down here under the proposed corrective action, the Grant Management Office will coordinate with BSIT to add an attachment to the award line feature to the Workday Award setup, which would negate the need for a manual naming convention for award attachments, parentheses, this option is not available in Workday. I was just unclear what is unavailable. Is it the naming convention is unavailable or the attachment at the award line is unavailable?
Yep, so I'm going to ask Ashley Meyer, the director of the Grants Management Office, who was doing some of that work for us to respond to that question. Thank you.
Thank you, DCA. Hello, Ashley Meyer, Director of the GMO. I worked with BSIT to investigate whether we could configure award lines in Workday to have attachments, and that feature is not available. So we can certainly implement a firm policy on naming conventions. As noted before, it was best practice, which is not a policy that is written anywhere. It was a suggestion.
Yeah, okay. So that was the part that I was a little unclear on. Okay, thank you. Thank you both. Oh, Mr. Mayor is not Mr. Mayor anymore. Okay.
It's done double.
Thank you, Mr. Comptroller. You all set?
I'm good, but apparently we've brought in somebody for this play. We've brought in a replacement for this play, so okay.
Madam City Administrator, pinch hitting for Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, and good morning all, including all honorable board members. Faith Lee, City Administrator, and we did not set up a play here. The mayor had to run out. But since I'm here, a couple things. One, I want to acknowledge the incredible work of the audits team, as always, in the partnership. This is what good government is all about. So I just want to remind all the folks in the room while we do these audits in front of the Board of Estimates, and also, of course, thank the Recovery Office as well as the Finance Office office and give a really big shout out to Ashley Meyer, who I think is maybe a year or so into the job at GMO and has already done a really incredible job of trying to standardize some of our grants management practices. And a lot of the grants management practices and standardization that we are doing through GMO is actually taking from the actual playbook of the Mayor's Office of Recovery Programs. And so I have a couple questions and a few statements. I'll start with my statements first, and then I'll end on my questions. So going back to my point about the work of the Recovery Office, in the playbook that they developed, and also the mayor's prior point about the audit itself and what the audit looked at. I think it's really important to note here, for example, subrecipient monitoring is a consistent finding through the single audit that we have every single year of us not having robust subrecipient monitoring. That wasn't a challenge in MORP in the $641 million. And they actually developed a protocol, standard operating procedures around subrecipient monitoring. And there are lots of subrecipients for the ARPA grant. And that wasn't a finding. We've actually now taken the toolkits, the protocols that were established by MORP, worked with GMO. GMO now has started or has developed a protocol around subrecipient monitoring. And we're hopeful that we will continue to make progress on that finding over the next few audits. I mean, I also want to acknowledge when it comes to the single audit, there are oftentimes it does take time to resolve a finding, but it was really because of the structure and the protocols that were set up by MORP that we were able to crib and take and apply citywide. So I do want to take a second to acknowledge that. My question, and maybe this is for you, Mr. Auditor. So there were 4, I think, overpayments that were identified, and we said out of the hundreds of millions, or whatever the numbers was, millions. Can you talk to me? I think the audit identified. Out of the 4 payments, I think the city actually had taken action or identified overpayment in how many of those cases of the 4?
So for the Health Department and Rec and Parks, they identified the double payment and worked to resolve it. And then MOHS, the vendor, identified and brought it to MOHS, and they worked to resolve it.
Okay, so what I want to repeat back here is so we're talking about 4 instances, and 2 of those instances, the city staff had identified the payment and was able to work with the vendor to reverse it or to get a credit of some sort. The third one, the vendor came to the city and said, hey, oops, we did this. And the city worked with that vendor in order to correct. And there was 1, and how much was that 1 that the auditor identified of the 4?
The one that we caught was $1,400 for
Oh,
BSID.
$1,400.
$1,400.
$1,400. Okay. I just wanted to clarify for the record. So when we talk about controls, there in a government of this size, and when you're talking about $4.5 billion, there are likely to be these types of things that occur. But what is important, as the city auditor mentioned, is the controls that the city puts in place so that we can catch those things whenever they do occur. And what I want to know is in 3 out of the 4 cases, the city actually did in some form or fashion, whether through the vendor or through our own staff, catch and reverse the issue. The one in question that was identified by the auditor is $1,400. So, which is still incredibly important because we want to be the strongest and best government and have the strongest fiscal controls as possible. But I do want to acknowledge that our systems were working to be able to identify these payments. Now, where I do think that there's opportunity throughout this entire audit, and what I do think is really important, Mr. Auditor, is we talked about, this is more on the accounting side, about how we book that reversal whenever it is received, and that is what needs to be standardized. Because what I heard throughout this is that agencies took different methods in order to reverse that transaction, and it showed up in the ledger differently, and that needs to be standardized across the board. And so I'll work with the Department of Finance to ensure that we put those protocols in place. I think the date was June 2026, and that we reconfigure Workday as much as possible to help us be able to catch those things. But I did want to, again, make the notes and the comments that I made, and then also thank you, Mr. Auditor, and everyone that was a part of this audit. Thank you.
I do want to point out a couple things. When deciding whether to include this finding in the report, we specifically did because this is not the first audit which we found duplicate payments. So it is greater than MORP and ARPA and these agencies. I also want to point out that Rec and Parks and the Health Department had a process outside of Workday to track. That process is not standardized. That's not across the city. That is them who took the extra step to go ahead and track these payments by themselves, and they caught those. For MOHS and BSIT, they did not have this process that they went, let's say, above and beyond, and that's could have resulted in them not catching it. So the process and control that Rec and Parks and the Health Department used to identify these internally is not citywide, is not a standard practice. So I want to point that out when we consider the applicability of this finding citywide.
No, I appreciate that. And I think what I'm communicating is I think there's an opportunity for us to standardize that and also make sure that we leverage Workday. But I do think it's important to acknowledge in the case of BCRP in the health department, the fact that they did have a process that went over and above to ensure that there wasn't a duplicate payment and that it resulted in the reversal. And so what was identified and lifted up here are the steps that many of our agencies are taking to go above and beyond what is standard practice, and it resulted in us catching a duplicate payment and reversing it. And so there's some opportunity, it sounds like, to standardize what that practice looks like and also to configure Workday to better help us catch those things ourselves. So I appreciate that.
Other board members? Hearing and seeing none, I am going to note this item. Again, thank you, Mr. Auditor, for your work. At the request of MORP, I'm going to change the agenda in response to the clerk and move on to SB 2514081. After this item, I will then again change the agenda to accommodate our friends from AFSCME who have shown up to make sure that they get their portion heard so that they can go do whatever they need to do. With that, the next item on the non-routine agenda is from the Mayor's Office of Recovery Programs under SB 2514081. This is a request to approve an interagency agreement providing $219,700 to the Baltimore Fire Department. We have the Mayor's Office of Recovery Programs. Please introduce yourself and the request.
Good morning, Mr. City Council President, Mr. Mayor, Mr. Comptroller, honorable members of the board. My name is Elizabeth Tatum, and I serve as the Chief Recovery Officer in the Mayor's Office of Recovery Programs. I do want to, I'm not sure if she's still in the room here, but I do want to publicly thank DCA Kearney. Since she has stepped into her new role, it would have been very easy for her to defer the city audit presentation to me. And it speaks to her integrity, her care for her team, and her commitment to the work that she chose to present on the item and respond to questions today. She also covered for me while I was on maternity leave for 3 months, so very, very grateful to her. So the agreement that is before you today is an interagency agreement for about 1 year with the city fire department. It is for $219,700. And this is I'll speak about the details of the interagency agreement in a moment, but this is one component of a significant multi-year $10 million initiative called BCOR, or the Baltimore Comprehensive Overdose Response to End the Epidemic. That is led by the University of Maryland, Baltimore, and the fire department's population health team is one portion of that. So I know when this item came before the city council president that your office had a number of questions, not about the interagency agreement with the fire department itself, but rather how it connected to the larger B Corps initiative, and then also to another large investment within the opioid restitution fund, the 24/7 outreach initiative. So B Corps is one of the named programs from our settlement agreements. That's for $10 million. The 24/7 outreach effort is for $15 million. Both of those are in the planning stages. So I will speak about the interagency agreement itself, and then I will turn the mic over to Augusta Gribbets. She is the program manager within the Baltimore City Mayor's Office of Overdose Response. Their office has significant oversight over the programmatic and strategy portions of the opioid restitution fund. So she'll speak about B Corps, 24/7 outreach, and how those initiatives fit together and complement one another. So the interagency agreement with the Baltimore City Fire Department is 1 year in length, and its scope is very straightforward. It's really about purchasing a Sprinter van and some other materials for an additional unit of the population health team within the fire department. I know probably many members of the board are already aware of this, but the population health teams, it's a division within the fire department's emergency medical services, and they do two things broadly. They co-respond to overdose events, and then they also proactively do harm reduction outreach. Presently, there are only 2 personnel and 1 mobile unit. So you can imagine in a city with a challenge this large, they are stretched very thin, and they simply are unable to do all of the things and meet the demands within the city. So adding an additional unit would greatly expand their capacity. And then there are also plans to do additional training and even expand the clinical services that those teams are empowered to provide. So they can do things like administer Narcan, buprenorphine, and again, co-respond to overdose events. So you might ask, why aren't they hiring personnel through this interagency agreement? That's because, unfortunately, there's a 10 to 12-month lead time simply to get the Sprinter van. So it doesn't make sense to hire personnel if they don't have a way to arrive at these emergent events. So this is just the first portion. We expect to do an additional interagency agreement in next year to actually fund this unit so that they can do what they need to do. So I will ask Augusta Gribbets to come forward in just a moment. There's one clarifying question that your office asked, Mr. City Council President, that I'd like to address. So one of the questions is about these 2 large initiatives. They're $25 million in total. They consist of multiple teams, right? They consist of the population health team. They consist of 24/7 outreach. We'll have street outreach teams. There are other teams within B Corps. And your office rightly asked, how are all of these teams going to work together, both on the ground and then in an administrative level? So one of the initiatives that BC Moore is undertaking right now is putting together, I'll call it an infographic or visual that shows how these teams interrelate and work together. That's still in development. It's not available yet to the public, but the plan is for that to become shared with stakeholders and then eventually to the public. So when it comes to subrecipient monitoring, for these efforts and really any others within the opioid restitution fund, our offices, so the recovery office and the overdose response office, will work in tandem with one another. So our office has, as you know, expertise in grants management, financial and compliance monitoring, and that's the lane that we'll monitor. And then they'll be looking at programmatic quality and program design. So when we, for example, go out to do a site visit, or when we're reviewing documents, we will have 2 folks go out, and they'll each have sort of a separate set of objectives that complement one another. As we're talking about financial compliance, we might be looking at contracts. What are the contracts that you have in place? How have you verified that all payments have been expended correctly within the budget? And their team might be evaluating, are you following your program design? Are you responding within the defined period of time? Are you following best practice, the best evidence-based practice for harm reduction? So that's how we'll be collaborating together on subrecipient monitoring. And with that, I will turn it over to Augusta to speak more about B-Corps 24/7 and how those two initiatives interact.
Good morning, Mr. Mayor, Mr. Council President. This is my first time up here, so excuse me. Mr. Comptroller and honorable members of the board, my name is Augusta Gribbets, and I'm the Director of Programs at the Mayor's Office of Overdose Response. Executive Director Sarah Whaley was unable to be here today, so I'm presenting on behalf of our office. Just a little bit of background on our office. The Mayor's Office of Overdose Response oversees the city's coordinated overdose response strategy to ensure best practices and alignment. The office is responsible for overseeing the programmatic monitoring and support for the Opioid Restitution Fund grantees. So I'm going to talk a little bit about B-Corps and the connection with 24/7 outreach. As for background, B-Corps was named, as Director Tatum stated, in the Walgreens settlement for $10 million. The B-Corps initiative is a collaborative project led by the University of Maryland, Baltimore. Next slide, please. There are 5 components to the B-Corps initiative. The first one is to develop and implement emergency department-based medication for opioid use disorder protocols at all 11 Baltimore City acute hospitals. The second component is to develop and implement a 24/7 telehealth medicine line for opioid use disorder. The third component is to establish interdisciplinary community connection teams that will ensure connection and retention to medication for opioid use disorder and other support services. The fourth element is to integrate a software platform to facilitate care across clinical, social, and non-traditional settings. And the last element is to increase capacity of the Baltimore City Fire Department's population health team, as Director Tatum stated, to co-respond to overdose calls and create a link between population health responders and the B-Corps network. Next slide, please. Additionally, as Director Tatum mentioned, 24/7 Outreach was also named in the settlement for $15 million. The purpose of 24/7 Outreach is focused on providing flexible, participant-centered supports that meet people where they are. Those services will respond to a broad range of needs as identified by the community members and their families. We are currently working with the consultant, Robert Harris, to ensure alignment between 24/7 Outreach and B-Corps. Currently, he's in the planning stages of this, and his scope focuses on creating a roadmap to ensure such alignment and integration between 24/7 Outreach, the B-Corps initiative, and other city-funded outreach programs to prevent any duplication and to ensure a collaborative and coordinated approach, to provide initial oversight for early implementation of the initiative's pilot, and to provide data sharing and performance tracking that aligns within the existing city framework. His contract started in October, and he's currently producing work as related to that scope. Mr. Council President, your office sent a number of questions regarding in relation to 24/7 Outreach and B-Corps. More broadly, I'm happy to spend time answering those questions now, if that works for you.
That's great. First off, thank you for your service. Welcome to city government. Welcome to the Board of Estimates. You did great.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us today. Very much looking forward to working with you and your team. I want to give just a little bit of my own background into why this is an area of priority for me and for this council, for the city council. This is an issue that we know has been an enormous challenge for Baltimore for many, many, many years. Clearly, substance misuse, addiction, the effects of the opioid crisis hit Baltimore in a way that very few other cities in America experienced. We've lost an inordinate amount of our neighbors, brothers, sisters, siblings. Very few families in this city have not been touched by this crisis. And for me, the way that it intersects with other mental health issues, be it trauma, be it schizophrenia, be it the other ways in which we see people suffering, is really important. Baltimore is the first city in the United States to have legislated trauma-informed care. It is really ahead of the curve when it comes to mental and public health in a lot of different ways. Truly grateful to the city solicitor and to the administration and their team for the aggressiveness at which they pursued the pharmaceutical companies that contributed to this crisis and the significant amount of money that was recovered. This is a once-in-a-lifetime, once-in-a-generation opportunity for Baltimore to not only hold those who committed part of this crisis accountable, but to also bring justice by making sure the victims, their families, and our entire city is healed from the damage that has been done. And so for me personally, it is extremely important that we get this right, that your office and all of the offices that intersect, and there are several with this issue, work with fidelity, work in collaboration, work directly with the council and other external stakeholders, and most importantly, that community is centered in all of this work. And I've appreciated Director Whaley and just the approach. She obviously comes with an extraordinary amount of expertise, having looked at this nationally. We feel blessed to have her working here in the city, and you as well. I do want to drill down because I do think, to your point, my concern is going to be around making sure there is both a large, comprehensive approach and that there is appropriate differentiation for the different initiatives that broadly touch this issue. Because I will tell you, a person on the street who is watching their neighbor suffer from an overdose or from any other visible disorder doesn't care whether it's B-Corps, 24/7, or any other service. They just want someone that can come and help. And I think that as a city, we have at times struggled with a lot of external partners that are in the space to make sure people get the appropriate service that they are due. We held a hearing in the city council about crisis response, and what we found is that not enough calls are diverted from 911 to 988, that often too many of our officers are not trained in crisis response, and that for a lot of residents, I think the mayor, myself, and many of us share this belief that we need an appropriate response every single time, that police should be doing police work, and that we also need someone else who can support, augment, or even fill the gap when it comes to issues around mental health. So hoping, Augusta, that you could drill in a little bit more. I heard your explanation of how these two initiatives, both of which are being funded through opioid restitution funds from the lawsuits. But if you could drill a little bit deeper, what will it look like for a resident of Baltimore to receive support either from 24/7 or from B-Corps?
Yeah, I think it's really important to know that residents themselves won't know that this is the B-Corps team versus this outreach team. We're really approaching it from a collaborative approach that, like, when a person calls for service, whatever that service might look like, that they have the appropriate response in a timely manner and when they need it. We're really cognizant of the fact that there are many great outreach providers all across the city, but they work in kind of a siloed approach currently. So our team is really focused on bringing all those outreach partners that are currently on the ground, B-Corps, and this larger umbrella of 24/7 outreach for behavioral health needs, all together to ensure that it isn't a discorded response in terms of that. And I think we're really in the planning phase. Our consultant is working to kind of understand the current landscape, where there are gaps, and how we can bridge and coordinate those gaps together under 24/7 and in connection with B Corps.
I appreciate that. I will just, again, sort of reiterate a point that you just made, which is there are a lot of different partners in the space. We've talked about Behavioral Health System Baltimore and some of their subrecipients, which include Baltimore Crisis Response. We've talked about B Corps. We've talked about 24/7. My concern as council president is that it is all coordinated, that it is all under one umbrella, and that at the end of the day, a resident who is struggling and suffering is able to get the support that they need. And so my push and my ask for you all, for Director Whaley, and all the way up, and I want to just offer my own support for this because I'm a stakeholder too, and I believe deeply in this work and in the council's role in supporting and facilitating and holding it accountable, is we have to be coordinated. There has to be clear systems, processes in place. There cannot be a million different partners, although every single one adds value. But if we're all kind of operating in our own silo, we've seen that the results are not good. So that is going to continue to be the posture of this city council. We do have another crisis response hearing coming up. We are starting to load up the Trauma-Informed Care Task Force. I know I've talked to the mayor a little bit about sort of how to partner around this work, which I think is absolutely vital and truly, to me, represents the next evolution of our city. We're already doing this, but we can be doing it so much better, and we finally have the funds to be able to execute. And then before turning to the mayor, I'll just kind of close by saying I think that Baltimore's in this rare and unique moment where we've seen our homicides get cut almost in half. We're seeing outstanding work in half. We're seeing outstanding work around reducing violence. We're seeing just a real turn. And I think what is going to accelerate that work, as well as the remaining issue with overdoses, is going to be this added piece where we are truly focusing our law enforcement on solving crime, and we are augmenting and supporting folks on the ground who can bring healing, healthcare, mental health, can just operate in a different way. And I think that is what the residents of this city are expecting. It is going to be a complicated, detailed process to get us there, but I am very much looking forward to working with your office. And with that, I'm going to turn over to the mayor. I actually have one more question when he and
You can go ahead.
Mr. Comptroller. You good?
I'm good. I asked mine when you finish. Go ahead.
Okay.
I mean, it's your first time. I'm not going to.
I appreciate it.
How many total people is the B Corps initiative expected to serve?
That's a great question. I'd have to look at the grant application. I'm looking at more. I don't. So right now it's currently in the planning phase, and their grant agreement is just for planning in terms of looking at the whole landscape, setting up systems for the telehealth line for medication for opioid use disorder, working with the hospitals, and then setting up these community connections teams. But we're still currently in the planning phase for both B Corps and 24/7 outreach.
Okay. I'm going to ask that that number gets reported back to the board when it is established, to the Board of Estimates when it's established, as well as to the City Council. I'm also going to ask, just again, so that I can fully wrap my own head around this, all of these different outreach workers, are they coming for, obviously, if there's an opioid issue, if there's an overdose, but other comorbid issues? Someone is experiencing a different mental health disorder. Are these the folks that are going to respond? Just help me understand.
So we know that substance use doesn't exist in a silo. Like, someone only has substance use disorder. There's a lot of other occurring problems and issues someone faces, such as housing insecurity, mental health related concerns. kind of all the social determinants of health kind of intersect at play. I think in thinking about a response system, a response ecosystem, we also have to take that approach of looking at it from a social determinant perspective. So it's both housing insecurity, a mental health disorder happening, an overdose, food insecurity, and really ensuring that we're looking at it from a holistic perspective, not just responding to a singular issue, because we know that doesn't happen in the everyday.
Yeah, I appreciate that. So, and again, the mayor's Office of Homeless Services also has a team
Yeah.
that goes out and addresses these issues. Again, I think what's going to be important as you, as the consultant, are developing these systems is both thinking about what it looks like to triage, to deploy the interaction between 911, 988, like once someone enters the funnel, just making sure they get the appropriate response and that there is a continuum, that the follow-up is consistent, that we don't just show up once and then that's the end of that. So appreciate that and looking forward to further discussion. I see the city administrator wants to respond as well.
Thank you so much, Mr. Council President. The one thing that I wanted to underscore and add here is around the current outreach that exists in the city versus what we are building with 24/7 outreach in this partnership with B Corps. Right now, outreach operates Monday through Friday from 9 a.m. to about 4:30 to 5 p.m., right? We know that overdoses and mental health issues and housing insecurity doesn't live within the working hours of city government. And so what the team behind me has done is they have thought outside of the box and thought about how we can best support our residents that might be facing any number of these challenges outside of normal business hours. And so that is where 24/7 outreach will come into play. What is happening, to your point, is because outreach is not available during those hours, then what you are seeing is our public safety partners are generally the ones that have to respond. Now they will have the tool, the resource, and the partnership of these outreach workers to be able to respond during those hours that are non-traditional, I would say, to government operations. But the idea is that 24/7 outreach and B Corps, like all of this will be, all the outreach connected to housing insecurity, mental health challenges, overdose, it will all be coordinated under this entity so that there isn't a gap in service. So that is the one thing that I wanted to make sure that we clarified and added for this group.
So the Mayor's Office of Homeless Services, their team
So they actually,
as well?
yes. So this B Corps, not B Corps, 24/7 outreach actually, was given to our homeless services director to respond. So as the team was developing our strategy related to how we were going to respond to overdoses with the additional funds that we were receiving, what we started talking about is where we have gaps in our system. 24/7 outreach was actually initially led by homeless services, but we did not want it to be perceived as to being only a homeless services issue. It needed to be centralized, and we wanted a team that could respond more to more than housing insecurity, and so that is why it is all centralized under BC Moore, but they are an active partner and really led a lot of the design work for 24/7 outreach.
Can you talk just briefly about the expectation of like who these folks are? Like, do they have clinical social work degrees? Do they have
Yeah. So all of that. So I think what we are going to be building is a pretty dynamic team. We haven't built it yet. We've built a strategy. We'll be working with some partners. I liken this to the work that we're doing around CVI. And there was a time, especially in the early stages of the CVIP, our Comprehensive Violence Prevention Plan, where I would offer that our community violence ecosystem but at the time was pretty disparate. And what we did under Monty is similar to what we're doing now, is we started, centralizing the coordination. But what we know we need, to answer your question, is those folks who, one, have lived experience. I think that is what you will see on this team, is those people who have been in the shoes of the people that they're responding to. What you will see is folks that will have a clinical background, whether it be in social work and or public, those who have a public health background. So the leader of the 24/7 outreach team, Bobby, actually used to run he ran Lower Baltimore. Remember when we had Lower Baltimore as the, Dr. D, what was the site? The tri-site, excuse me. So folks will recall that during the pandemic, we had to actually stand up this tri-site to support individuals who were suffering from being unhoused, but who also might have had COVID and needed to isolate. And so Bobby actually stood up the tri-site at Lower Baltimore, where we were able to not only provide some, shelter support, but we also provided clinical support as well. So he worked in the health department for years and led the SPOT van that you've heard, so the mobile outreach van. So he comes with a clinical background, but also a deep human services background as well. And so given the success of the Tri-Site as well as the SPOT mobile van, he will be now leading the 24/7 outreach team. So it will be a combination of again, like I said, those folks with deep lived experiences, as well as the human services, public health element of it, and social work. And so that's why we brought in a leader who has both the public health as well as kind of the deep human services connection as well to lead this work.
Understood. Appreciate that. I think before turning over to the mayor, and again, I've appreciated the work the office has done so far. I've appreciated the ongoing dialogue that I know you all have been having with my staff, and the many, many, many questions that we've sent, and you should expect more. But this is an area that is of interest to the council for certain, and I think I'll just leave it, is being cognizant of not having too many cooks in the kitchen, making sure the systems are integrated and working seamlessly with each other, which is hard. But making sure that at the end of the day, the response that a resident gets out on the street is reflective of all of these different components, and that they're able to work together hand in glove, versus it feeling really, really, really clunky. And I know that there's going to be some hit or miss. There's going to be some, it's going to take a while to get there. But again, I will just say, for me, for the council, for all of us in Baltimore, this represents a inflection point and a really important opportunity to go deep into an issue that has been catastrophic, frankly, for our city for a long time. And so we're looking forward to seeing the consultants' report, to seeing how all these pieces play together. With that, Mr. Mayor.
No, thank you, Mr. President. I think the city administrator touched on a lot, but I just want to say it in a different and more Baltimore way. I think that when you think about opioids and addiction and overdose in Baltimore, listen, as I often say, when you think about Penn North, for example, Penn North has had a problem with overdose addiction and drug addiction since Billie Holiday lived around Pennsylvania Avenue, right? And we're building something from the ground up, and the city administrator used the exact example that I would give. 5 years ago, we decided to build a comprehensive approach of bringing the community, the city, the experts, the hospitals, everybody together around this long-standing challenge of gun violence. And that it had to be community and people-centered, right? There's a literal movie about it, but you can see where we went out into the community to those that were most directly impacted and allow them to influence what we're going to be doing. We had to break down silos, not just within city government, but within the community. When you talk about not just CVI, but other organizations, our hospital-based partners, organizations that were working around gun violence, and making sure that they all working together, singing one tune, one band, one sound. There were things that we had to build that didn't exist. When you think about that, 5 years ago, gunshot victims in Baltimore did not qualify for victim services. Right? Those are the kind of things that we had to build in, and now we're seeing the results of that. I would use 24/7 outreach as an example, right? To all of us, right? I know it sounded crazy to me when they said to me, well, they only work at this time. It's like, well, most people that struggle with this, they're going to need help at night. We're building those things in, and I think it's important to note the same way that we had to systematically and responsibly help our partner organizations to grow who are doing the work, like YAP, for example. We couldn't just go to YAP. We delayed GVRS, as you know, because they were not ready to take that big lump of expansion. We have to also understand that we're helping to build out our community partners in their capacity, and we have to do that in a responsible way to allow them to grow, to do the great work that they're doing, but also to not overbearing them and cause them problems on the back end. We all are in it together. We're going to make sure that we continue. I think that it should be noted that our overdoses continue to decline in the city of Baltimore, and we have a long way to go. But we are just now in the beginning of building how we're going to deal with this issue in its completeness and its complexities for a long time. And I think, Madam Solicitor, I didn't say anything to get me in trouble in court. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And I'll just note, it was referenced earlier, and the city administrator and mayor made this point around overdoses don't just happen within that window and time frame. And, when it's outside of that window, we often see police have to come and respond. I would also add, though, that too often, even within that window, we see police respond singularly and without additional support in a way that, while we appreciate every effort of law enforcement to address this issue, probably should not just be law enforcement going and supporting people. And so it is both, to me, about that window outside of the 9 to 5, Monday through Friday piece, but also really having a more robust, more comprehensive system, because, again, we're just not seeing enough calls get diverted from 911 to 988. We're not seeing enough support for our officers when they're out there. And I think residents of this city have an expectation, especially as we have pushed on 988, as we have pushed to engage an alternative response, that a response will be there. And in too few cases, it has been. And so, again, this represents an enormous opportunity for our city. Mr. Mayor?
Yeah, thank you for that, Mr. President. I just want to take a few things. One, when you talk about 988 or 911 diversion, like, the truth is the city is one of the largest ones in the country, but it goes to a couple things. One, we know the fire department is often the ones, this contract is the fire department contract responding to those overdoses, and why we're trying to help them evolve and grow their capacity to deal with it in a different way. But even on the incidents that you mentioned where police, which sometimes isn't just, as you noted earlier, about overdose or addiction, but mental and behavioral health issues, we also, that goes back to our organizations and folks that we're working with to help them grow their capacity, because there isn't any organization in Baltimore City today that we could divert all of our 911 diversions to. And our job is to help us grow, not just BCRC, but BCRI, all these other organizations, to be at that point where we could be deploying more and more of them over time. And I think that, we'll get there. It won't be easy. It may not, happen in our time in elected office, as we think about like the longevity of growing these things, especially in the climate that we're in with our partners in the federal government and what they will and will not put funding towards, but I think that we will continue to work there. And lastly, as you know, this is also a part of our consent decree of how the police department is dealing with it. And Judge Bedard said that we had made significant progress, but we all know we have a long, long, long way to go, and we're just going to stay committed to doing that work.
Well, it is my goal that we are going to see it happen in this term, and
the consent decree, yes.
so one more
Absolutely.
question for me. Is this all going to be connected with the CAD system? Like, just talk to me about like how folks are going to deploy.
Yeah, so a recent update is that the paragraph 97 of the consent decree team is now absorbed in the Baltimore City Mayor's Office of Overdose Response. So we have 2 program managers whose main job is to focus on executing and fulfilling the needs of paragraph 97 of the consent decree. And part of that is understanding the CAD system and diversion-related calls. So it's all interconnected, and I think as it comes from one office, that's helpful in thinking about it being a lot more connected and aligned than living in separate offices.
Understood. All right. Any other questions from the board?
Sir, thank you.
Hearing and seeing none, I would entertain a motion to approve this item.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor of approving this item say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say nay. The item is approved.
Thank you so much.
All right. We are now going to go to SB 251428. This is a request to note a side letter agreement with the AFL-CIO, AFSCME Council 3, and Locals 44, 558, and 2202. On behalf of the Office of the Labor Commissioner, we have Labor Commissioner Deborah Moore Carter. Commissioner Moore Carter, the floor is yours. I also want to recognize our folks from AFSCME as well. I'm going to start with you, Ms. Carter, and then we will go to them.
Good morning, honorable members of the Board of Estimates. I am Deborah Moore Carter, Labor Commissioner for the City of Baltimore, and I am pleased to have on the agenda for notation the tentative agreements with AFSCME Local 44, 558, and 2202, as well as the wage scales. And I will tell you why. So thanks to Mayor Scott, the City of Baltimore set aside money for a study that was conducted by Evergreen. And as a result of that study, there's going to be a 25-step scale. The first 10 steps will be implemented in FY26. The next 10 steps will be implemented in FY27, and the last 5 will be implemented in FY28. For many years, our workers have worked. They haven't received the compensation that they so rightly deserve, so this study provides for that. And with it, in the first year, there will be a 3% spread between the steps, and the second year, 2% between the steps, and the third year, 2% between the steps. The reason why I'm coming now is because the study is a monumental task, and we want the employees to have their wages before the holidays. In addition to the step increases, there's going to be a 2.5% increase in FY27 and a 2.75% increase in FY28. In addition to that, we have established labor management committees, safety committees with all of the unions, which will, once this is noted, we're going to start the labor management committees. We have agreed to train city employees on safety topics, so that's another thing that we will be doing going forward. So we have several side letter agreements as well that are a part of the contract. Local 44 is labor and trades. They are the boots on the grounds people. Local 558, community health nurses and nurse practitioners. Local 2202 are the human service workers. So with that, if there's anybody from AFSCME who'd like to.
Yeah, if you could introduce yourself and go right ahead.
Sure. Good morning, members of the board.
Yeah,
Thank you
tilt
for.
the microphone up
You know,
significantly. Our labor
Really?
commissioner is on a different level.
Okay. Good morning, members of Board of Estimates. Thank you for having us. My name is Trevor Taylor. I'm a chief shop steward with Local 44, also a city employee for the last 23 years. This contract is a long time coming. I mean, a long time coming.
Yes, Lord.
Not for just this year's, but over many years. Our leadership, we demanded real change, working with the city on health and safety and better pay wages, and that's where we are today. I am proud to say that we made incredible progress this year with this new contract. I want to thank Office of the Labor Commissioner, Ms. Deborah Moore Carter, and also the Mayor's Office, particularly for their continued engagement on this agreement for this new contract. This is a really a historical contract for AFSCME workers, not just for Local 44, for 2202 and 558. And I'm just very proud of it. Thank you.
Yes, I do. Hi, good morning.
Good morning.
Hi, my name is Wendy Smith. I am the president. I represent registered nurses and nurse practitioners within the Baltimore City Health Department. This is historic. This contract that we have right now is historic. It will definitely change how employees come into Baltimore City government. We are so proud of this contract. We are proud, and I represent, again, 558. We also have here 44 and 2202. We have a fair contract that finally rewards longevity of service for the city the city members of existing employees, and it benefits our new employees that come into the door. I want to thank the OLC. I want to thank Ms. Deborah Moore Carter. She worked with us tirelessly during our negotiations and during our sessions to ensure that we have this contract. I also want to thank the Mayor's Office. Thank you again for working with us. I'm just so proud of this contract. Thank you.
Great. I'm going to go to anybody else. We're good. I'm going to go to the mayor on this one.
Thank you, Mr. President, and thank you to the members. I'll talk to you first. I'm trying not to be emotional because I'm thinking about Mr. Glenn, and this was the last conversation that he and I had was about making sure, as he was said, and I can't say what he actually said on the microphone today, but I'm going to paraphrase it. Brandon, blank. We overdue. It's time. And I just want y'all to know that I heard that from him and heard it from you every day, that you all show up and do the things that no one else would do when no one else would do it. You take all the complaints, all the trash, literally and figuratively, but also you never don't show up. And it's been a long time coming, but I'm so proud that we together have been able to show up for you and been able to do something for you and your families. And Mr. President, Mr. Comptroller, and we'll talk more about this next week. I just want to highlight a few things that with this contract, no employee in these bargaining units will be paid less than an hourly wage of $20. Hazard pay increased from 15 cents to 75 cents per hour, and meal allowance, which is very important, increased from $8 to $15. We are finally, as a city, showing up for the people who get the city moving every day. And I just want to say thank you to all of you for your work, for your patience, for your pressure, and we'll just continue to work together. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I will echo some of the mayor's remarks and just thank the frontline workers of AFSCME and all the folks that pick up the trash for our city, that support the nurses of our city, that support some of the backbreaking operations that we have in Baltimore. Too often, you all are not thought of as public servants, but we know that you are, and that you are out there every single day making the city work so that this board and the many people that we represent can continue to bring a Baltimore that we all deserve. And I appreciate everybody, Mr. Glenn, all the leadership from AFSCME. I have a few colleagues on the council that also pushed really hard, particularly for sanitation workers. Councilman Glover, who was one himself at one point, Councilman Schleifer, who during the pandemic made a really hard push to make sure folks got what they were due. And again, appreciate Labor Commissioner and all the folks that got us to this contract. It is extremely important. It speaks to the values of how we think about public servants here in Baltimore. Going to go one more time to the mayor, and then
I think city administrator.
Mr. Mayor.
She have to wait. I didn't actually. It's funny that she's coming up now. I also just didn't. I forgot to recognize the members of my team. So the city administrator, the labor commissioner, Khalil. Khalil's been running in and out of here so much. I didn't know if he was in here. Marvin and my team, they all did a great job of working with AFSCME, not just on this contract, but in general. As we know, we've been going through a lot of things with some tragedy and being able to do this work. So thank you all for your great work. Now we got to do it again for some other unions.
Comptroller?
I don't want to belabor the point. I'm happy we did this. All right? My wife is an AFSCME employee, and she does not make $20 an hour. So I am happy we did this. Thank you.
Is the least I've ever heard this man speak about anything. So congratulations, you are now in the record book. Madam City Administrator.
Yes, thank you so much, Mr. Council President and honorable board members. To the mayor's point, I also wanted to take the opportunity to thank a few people. One, I really want to take a point of personal privilege, and I think we all should give a round of applause to Madam Labor Commissioner. As everyone has said, this has been a long time coming, but it has been a long time coming under the leadership of Madam Labor Commissioner. And so I just really want to thank her for her leadership and her diligence throughout this process. But there are a few other people and a little bit of context that I wanted to set around kind of the time frame. So I think about at this point, 3 years ago, if not longer, looking at our DHR partners, we decided as a city, because through the mayor's direction, that we needed to overhaul our compensation system in the city of Baltimore. And so we took the time to actually go out and bring on a firm that did a comparative analysis and did a salary study, which did take several years for us to be able to do that salary study. But it is because of that diligence and the time that we took to actually compare our scales to all the other jurisdictions surrounding us that we were able to modernize the pay structure in the city of Baltimore. And AFSCME is the first union that is going to be the recipient of a modernized pay scale in the city of Baltimore. And so I think it is important to talk about the work that led into this and how this is a part of the work that we are doing to modernize how we operate our government, starting with how we pay our people. And I'm very excited that AFSCME gets to be the beneficiary of the first implementation of that new salary study. I also want to take some time to thank Laura Larson, who I think might be in the back of the room. Hey, Laura. Everybody knows Laura as our budget director. But in order to get here, we actually did have to make some very hard decisions throughout the fiscal 26 budget, and we built in the wages that we are now going to be able to implement for AFSCME. And so that means that we had to make some difficult decisions. We had to make some reductions and some cuts and to right-size some things so that we can better pay our workers. But thanks to the budget team for being a partner. And when the mayor said we got to build this in, we all worked together to figure out how to build this into the budget. And so I'll end there and just thanking some of the additional folks, HR and budget, that were a part of the lead-in to get us to where we are today. The mayor already thanked Marvin James, who has been on the front lines with the labor commissioner during this process. And then what I will end on is a huge, huge thank you to our workers. Everybody, on the board has thanked you today. I got stopped a lot of times. Mr. Reggie Moore stopped me more times than I can count. And I'm calling you out, Mr. Reggie, and pushed us on getting this done because it is so important to our workers. And I hope y'all know that we love you. Thank you.
I also want to personally thank my deputy, Veronica Jones, who is, she's the glue that keeps the Office of the Labor Commissioner together.
Wonderful.
All right. Anybody else? No more thank yous. Well,
I love the hugging that goes on when it's done.
all right. I will note this item. All right. Next in our very mixed up agenda will be a walk-on item from the Mayor's Office of Children and Family Success under SB 2514336. This is a request to approve a grant agreement with the Family League of Baltimore, Inc. for their work in supporting aid to families affected by the federal government shutdown. On behalf of MOCFS, we have Executive Director Dr. Deborah Brooks. Dr. Brooks, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Good morning, Mayor Scott, President Cohen, Comptroller Henry, honorable members of the board. Next slide, please. I'm coming before you today to bring before you a contract that we would like to have with the Family League and provide a bit of background. Next slide, please. As we know, there was a federal government shutdown that began on October 1st, 2025. With that shutdown, there were two groups that were greatly impacted. Next slide, please. That were greatly impacted. There were furloughed federal employees who were still required to report to work. They were entitled essential employees, as well as supplemental nutrition assistance program, or SNAP, recipients that also were impacted by the federal government shutdown. These two subgroups still needed to have their children report or go to child care facilities, and due to the shutdown, were not receiving their supplements or their pay. In response, Honorable Mayor Scott allocated $1 million from the general funds to provide assistance for these employees to still be able to cover their child care. Next slide, please. MOCFS would like to partner with the Family League to be able to support these two groups so that they could continue to pay for their child care. The Family League would process the grant applicants, issue award notifications to the eligible applicants, as well as manage payments, processing, and distribution to the subgrantees who would actually be the child care providers. I want to be clear that we actually wanted to partner with Family League because they were very instrumental in doing this work during the pandemic, and they were able to provide subsidies to child care providers. Next slide, please. Eligibility for the child care subgrant would be, again, those two subgroups that you heard me talk about. Those two groups would be those federal employees that were still required to report to work but were not receiving any pay. They would have to provide proof that they were furloughed and reporting to work daily. They would have to provide proof of their child care tuition costs, as well as proof that their child or children are enrolled, actively participating in a licensed child care provider facility at least 3 months consecutively prior to November 1st. As well as SNAP recipients, they would also have to provide proof that they were SNAP recipients and eligible, that their families must show proof of child care tuition costs, as well as their children being enrolled in a licensed child care provider. These families are able to apply for a maximum of $2,500 per month for up to 2 months. We said $2,500 because we know, based upon the child's age, the cost of child care is extremely high. As a grandmother of 7, ranging from ages 21 to 2, I am very familiar with the cost of child care. To date, we have over 700 constituents that have already shown interest in this need. Next slide, please. And so the grant term, again, the grant would be retroactively to November 1st. Family League will approve and disperse all payments of the subgrantees by December 31st, and then the grant agreement with Family League will terminate by February 28th for the purpose of closeout. And thank you, and I will accept any questions that you may have.
Thank you, Dr. Brooks. I know this is an issue that impacts both me and the mayor very personally. We know that the cost of childcare is extremely high, that there are not enough providers, that it is a major issue not just for the city of Baltimore, but for the United States of America. And in a different world, in a different country, this is something that government would support. It is really hard, speaking as a dad, in a secure family where we have 2 working parents, both of whom earn a decent salary. It's still really tough to figure out childcare for our 2 kids. And I think a lot about families in Baltimore where there are not 2 parents that are in decent financial shape, where you have a single mother or a single father, or in many cases, as you and I have discussed, a grandparent that is supporting our young people. And this is an issue where I personally want to see us do more. I know the mayor and I have had some conversations about partnership between the council and the administration to really think deep about childcare, early childhood education, et cetera, and look forward to discussing that with you as well. Just wondered about the Family League as the recipient. Why were they selected? What was the vetting process for that? Were there other organizations that were considered? Why that determination?
Yes, great question. So we also looked at United Way.
Yeah.
United Way is currently also the recipient of the community schools funds for rental assistance. And so we know that they're also able to disperse and work closely with families around that. And so we did not want to also place this because we wanted to make sure we got this money out to the families that needed it right away, but also because Family League has done this work. And so they were very instrumental in making sure that those child care providers received these subsidies during the pandemic. So this was not new work for them. And again, we wanted to make sure that the families were able to be supported expeditiously. And so with that, we went forward with Family League.
Understood. I know I recently took a trip, I think you did too, I forget, but to the child care center run by the Family Tree, and saw just awesome operation that they've got going on, both to support providers as well as families and parents in a sort of a whole ecosystem that they are seeking to support over there. Have there been conversations with that organization, with others that are in this space?
So absolutely, yes. We actually support the Family Tree through our children's cabinet. We actually fund them and work very closely with them. We also fund our ECAC through our children's cabinet and work very closely
So
with
the ECAC,
yes,
just for the public.
early childhood. I'm sorry.
Early Childhood Advisory
Advisory Council, thank you, I'm sorry. And we also work very closely with Family League on all of our early learning initiatives. And so this is also, right. We do work very closely, hand in hand. As you also know, under the Mayor's Office of Children and Family Success, we have Head Start. We work very closely with city schools, early learning, and I also sit on the mixed delivery. And so we work very closely across the ecosystem of early childhood, early literacy to continue this great work. But again, for this specific initiative, we wanted to make sure that we got these supports and this subsidy out to those families, to those child care providers in an expeditious manner.
Thank you, Dr. Brooks. Other questions? Nope. Nope. Okay. Hearing and seeing none, I would entertain a motion to approve this item.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor of approving this item say aye.
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 All those opposed say nay. The item is approved.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right. We have another walk-on item from the mayor's office under SB 2514341. This is a request to approve the Second Amendment to a city office lease with the Maryland Port Administration for the Top of the World observation deck. On behalf of the mayor's office, we have Deputy Mayor Calvin Young. Deputy Mayor Young, the floor is yours.
Thank you. I'll try to be brief. The mayor's office requests approval of the extension of the 2005 lease agreement between the City of Baltimore and the Maryland Port Administration. This is the second extension. The first was originally given for us to shut down the Top of the World attraction. But the Top of the World, it was slated to close, but under the leadership of the CEO of what is now Create Baltimore, Robin Murphy, along with strong lobbying from the mayor, members of the council, including Zach Blanchard, and Senate President Ferguson, and many staff in the mayor's and governor's offices, a path was found for the facility to remain open with new energy. The Top of the World attendance, for record, is up 40% this year, with plans to update and renew the attraction to its former glory. This new extension will last through the end of fiscal year 26, during which time the city and the Maryland Port Administration will negotiate a new long-term lease for the facility. Any questions?
I want to thank you, Deputy Mayor, for your work on this. Again, also to thank my colleague, Councilman Blanchard, who I know was intimately involved, as well as the Senate President and the entire Team 46, as well as I know some folks from the governor's office as well. So thank you for the team effort to keep Top of the World rocking and rolling. Any questions from the board? Hearing, you got?
Oh, no, I've just thumbs up, keep it open. Keep
Great.
The cities.
Great. Hearing none, I would entertain a motion to approve this item.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor of approving this item say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say nay. The item is approved.
Thank you.
All right. I'm going to just make sure this is what happens when y'all get me all mixed up in the script.
Let me know if you need any assistance.
Yeah, Madam Clerk,
Well, I can go off of who's still in the audience, so.
Well, let's go in our sequence.
No, I'm saying, I'm like, Sarah's still here, and she was next.
Madam Clerk, I'm going to go to you for your immediate intervention.
Mr. President,
No.
my next item is SB 2514196, and the comptroller is correct. This is for Department of Planning and Planning. He usually is here present to speak on Baltimore City Public School System Capital Improvement Program for fiscal years 27 through 32, and this item is a $357,500,000 item.
Excellent. I see Director Parnellum. Parnellum? Is that how we pronounce it?
Parnellum.
Parnellum? Okay. Director Parnellum, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Good morning, Sarah Parnellum, Division Chief for Policy and Data Analysis with the Baltimore City Department of Planning. And we have before you the FY 27 through 32 capital improvement program for Baltimore City Public Schools. The city schools CIP approval is on a different schedule from the other city agencies because city schools must submit a request to the state in the fall of each year. So the city schools request must be approved by the city schools Board of School Commissioners, by the Baltimore City Planning Commission, Baltimore City Board of Finance, all of which have already occurred. And what we're here for today is the Baltimore City Board of Estimates. And then with the approval of those bodies, the mayor's office supports the program and a final request is made to the state. The initial submission by city schools was due in early October, and then any amendments and approvals are submitted in late November, which is why the timing of today's meeting as a condition for the city schools to receive state public school construction funds. The local share becomes part of the city's capital improvement program, and for FY27, the local share is $27.5 million. The state allocation is anticipated to be approximately $25 million for FY27. And I'm happy to answer any questions. I'm also joined by a representative from City Schools if there's any questions that I can't answer.
The only question that I have, several board members here have kids in Baltimore City Schools. Obviously, at all times, the most important factor is going to be safety. I know there's been a lot of conversation, and I heard Dr. Santelises in the last board meeting talk about making sure there are locks on doors, beginning with high schools throughout the city, that we're on a trajectory to do that. I want to make sure there is a lock on every single classroom door in the city of Baltimore. We know that too often throughout the United States of America, mass shootings, school shootings, violence that seeps into schools is real. And so want to see, does this address that issue?
This does not directly address that issue, so this is for major renovations and for systemic improvements like roofs and windows, but Maureen Gershberg from City Schools is able to address that.
Good morning. My name is Maureen Gershberg. I'm the Director of Facilities Planning and Strategy for Baltimore City Public Schools. And so, yes, we have the door hardware initiative that is rolling out for a select group of our larger high schools. And then the CIP funds that you're approving today, some of them are going towards some pretty major projects. And so our standard as we renovate our schools, slowly but surely, is to have them meet that locking standard.
Understood. I appreciate that. I'll just share what I shared with Dr. Santelises as well. Appreciate the push that you all are doing, particularly starting with groups of high schools. Understand that it's more challenging with our older buildings, that we have all of our 21st century schools, that it's a little easier to retrofit or get a lock up there. But this is going to be a priority for me, for the city council, should be for all of us, to make sure all of our kids, all of our teachers are safe. It is the year 2025, and we know that sadly throughout this country, violence in schools is real. And so I want to just let you know, and just for the board to know, that this is a priority of mine. Again, all of our kids need to be safe. All of our teachers need to know that if, God forbid, there is some incident of violence, particularly a school shooter that finds its way into one of our buildings, that we have protocols in place and that they can lock their door. So appreciate that. We'll be in touch further on this issue.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. All right. Other questions? Hearing and seeing none, I would entertain a motion to approve this item.
So moved.
Yes, sir.
Second.
All right. I'm going to give the approval to the mayor and the second to the city solicitor. All of those in favor of approving this item, sorry, Alan, all of those in favor of approving this item say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say nay. The item is approved.
Thank you.
Thank you. Madam Clerk, next item, if you could.
Thank
Yeah, and I will share that there are two items coming up that are related to the same entity, if you might choose to hear them together.
Let's do it.
They are SB 25-13303. This item is for the Department of Public Works, and this is the Fifth Amendment to a Memorandum of Understanding with the Northeast Maryland Waste Disposal Authority, and this transaction is for $3,500,000. There is also a second Memorandum of Understanding, SB 25-13299, again, also with Northeast Maryland Waste Disposal Authority for $7,500,000.
Is it still morning? I guess it is. Good morning, honorable board members.
Ever so barely.
Board
Morning.
members, Kendall Abu Hakim, Bureau Head for the Department of Solid Waste, or Department of Public Works, Bureau of Solid Waste. I also like to take a moment of
You can
personal...
dream, you can dream.
Okay. A moment of personal privilege and say thank you to everyone involved in getting the AFSCME contract ratified, because that's a huge win for our solid waste workers. So I just want to make that publicly known. DPW is here seeking approval for the transfer of capital funds to the Northeast Maryland Waste Disposal Authority, herein known as the Authority, to facilitate capital projects that are already underway. These items come under two separate MOUs, as previously mentioned, for specific projects. But one is between the Department of Public Works and the Authority, and this is for the repairs of the Quarantine Road landfill in the amount of $3.5 million. And secondly, there is one between the mayor and the city council and the Authority, and this is for repairs at our Kane Street location in the amount of $7.5 million. Just for awareness, our Kane Street location houses our dirty streets and dirty alley operations, our bulk collection, white goods, graffiti removal, mechanical street sweeping, and there's also the warehouse to our items such as PPEs. In Q1 of next year, calendar year, it will also house our yard waste crews as well. I am prepared to give some brief overview of the Authority if it is deemed necessary by any of the board members, but if not, myself and my colleague, Mr. Antoine Bird, who is the Chief of Disposal Service, are prepared to answer any questions.
Excellent. Questions from the board? Mr. Comptroller.
I have a question, but I'm not sure if it's for this level, so I'm just going to throw it out there and say, also, given the hour, I would be happy to have this answer offline. But at some point, could we remind the board of just the total benefits of being a member of the Northeast Maryland Waste Disposal Authority? Because we asked for information, and we pay about $1 million a year to be a member of the Authority. And at some point, not necessarily right now, it would be nice to be reminded of what we get for that.
Okay. Sounds good. We can certainly do that.
Mr. Comptroller, do you want a briefing for board members? What are you looking for here?
Well, if there are others who are interested in being reminded, I would be happy to have you put something in writing. If it's just me, we can set up a briefing. Okay.
Absolutely.
I'm interested. Why don't you put something in writing?
Will do.
Appreciate it. Noted. You good? All right. Madam Clerk, are we calling these, or are we voting on these two items together?
Let's call each number and have a vote for each, just so it's very clear for the recorded record.
Okay. Could you please read out this?
I'm happy to.
number?
First up, SB 25-13303. This is Amendment 5 to a Memorandum of Understanding with Northeast Maryland Waste Disposal Authority.
I will entertain a motion for that item.
Second.
It has been moved and properly seconded. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed, please say nay. This item is approved. Madam
you.
Clerk, please read the second item.
The second item for vote is SB 25-13299 for the Department of Public Works, Memorandum of Understanding with Northeast Maryland Waste Disposal Authority for $7,500,000.
So move.
Second.
All those in favor of approving this item, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, say nay. This item is approved.
Thank you, honorable members. Enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you, Mr. Abu Hakim. Madam Clerk,
Our next item up is SB 25-14242. This is for the Department of Housing, and Community Development. It too is related. It has a second item that is related. This one, 14242, is a First Amendment to a grant agreement with HCH Real Estate Company, Inc. The project is Sojourner Place at Park, and this is a $0 item. And the second is SB 25-14243, the Department of Housing and Community Development, also a First Amendment to an agreement for HCH Real Estate Company, also related to Sojourner Place at Park, and a $0 value. And I believe the Commissioner will be explaining to us the need for these updates to the agreement.
Madam Commissioner, please introduce yourself and share the item.
Excellent. Thank you, Council President Cohen. Alice Kennedy, Housing Commissioner, Baltimore City. I'm here to discuss two items that we have for you. We can go to the next slide. We also have the presentation up. So the property addresses in terms of the non-routine items that we have today, it's the same property address. This is for the project Sojourner Place at Park. So on the next slide, we just have the two SB numbers for you that the clerk just read in. The two agreements are for the same project, but we have two different funding sources. So one, SB 25-14242, is tied to our Affordable Housing Trust Fund, and then SB 25-14243 is tied to the Housing Accelerator Fund. The project is in Baltimore's historic Five and Dime district. It's the renovation of 5 buildings at the corner of Liberty and Fayette. This project actually will end up, it's with the healthcare for the homeless as well as Episcopal Housing, continues their Sojourner at Oliver and soon to be Sojourner Place at Fallsway projects as well. 28 units are set aside specifically for permanent supportive housing, and 14 units are reserved as affordable for workforce housing. The reason why we're here today is, and this as a walk-on, is because the lender actually had a couple of items that they needed to have us amend in the grant agreements in order for them to be comfortable. We are looking to try to get this to closing in the next several weeks, and it isn't uncommon that some of the larger lenders do have certain things that come up with real estate transactions such as these. So the items that we are looking to amend on the next slide, for the Affordable Housing Trust Fund, the termination for convenience is being removed as a lender condition precedent, and then the sections have also been updated with revised form rent regulatory agreements and the declaration of covenants into the agreement. And then for the SB 25-14243 item, the Housing Accelerator Fund item, sections K5 and K6 of the agreement previously allowed for the termination without cause, but the sections have been updated with the following, with the revised form regulatory agreement as well as the declaration of covenants into the agreement. As the clerk stated, there's a $0 impact with these amendments. It's specific just on some form and legal language in order to satisfy a lender. Happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Madam Commissioner. Comptroller Henry?
Not a question, but a comment that the other reason we are here today on this is because the groundbreaking for the Sojourner Place at Park is already scheduled for December 2nd, which would be before our next board meeting. So I want to take this opportunity to thank all the other members of the board for walking this item on so that we can get this done and get started in actually making these facilities available to people. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Comptroller. Other board members? Hearing and seeing none. Madam Clerk, again, we're going to take these two separately.
Yep.
And so can you read the first for us, and then I'll entertain a motion?
Yep, my pleasure. SB 25-14242 for the Department of Housing, First Amendment to Grant Agreement HCH Real Estate Company, Inc. for Sojourner Place at Park.
Second.
All those in favor of approving this item say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say nay. This item is approved. Madam Clerk.
And up next, we have SB 25-14243, Department of Housing and Community Development, First Amendment to Agreement with the HCH Real Estate Company, Inc. for Sojourner Place at Park.
Second.
All those in favor of this item, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say nay. This item is approved. Thank you, Madam Commissioner. All right. Anybody else?
No, Mr. Council
Good.
President, we have taken care of all items and we've worn out our audience.
All right. No new business before the board.
Anything for the good of the order?
As there is no new business before the board, we will now adjourn this meeting. The next regular meeting of the Board of Estimates will occur on Wednesday, December 3rd, 2025 at 9 a.m. I thank everyone for participating and tuning in.
Hi, TV 25. I think we're ready. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the Board of Estimates bid opening for November 19th, 2025. We have a pretty quick opening today. So up first, I want to share some addenda received from agencies for the Bureau of Procurement, RFQ 000768. This is for snow removal services. It was originally scheduled to open today, but that new opening date is now December 3rd, 2025. Again, that was RFQ 768. That bid will open on 12/3/2025. And for Recreation and Parks, RP 24821, Patterson Park Pool House renovation, originally scheduled for today, that will now open on 12/17/2025. Again, that was RP 24821. Patterson Park Pool House, and that will open on 12/17/2025 at our regularly scheduled opening time of 12 noon. Up first for opening today, I think I will start with the bulk tax sale first, since we don't actually have anything to technically open. Is that okay with everybody? Is that okay with you? Okay. So every year, the Department of Finance and its partners in housing advertise a bulk tax sale, and the bulk tax sale for 2025 has been advertised, and I'm going to share the Board of Estimates approval for this so that we give some background for folks watching, and then we'll share the results. So the board was requested to approve a bulk tax sale notice for the Department of Finance, Bureau of Revenue Collections, on October 15th, 2025. Per the Maryland Tax Property Code 14-811, Baltimore City may withhold from the annual tax sale any property designated for redevelopment purposes if the property meets objective criteria established by the mayor and city council of Baltimore City. These properties are set aside and available for the public to bid on in the bulk tax sale. This request is to approve the 2025 bulk tax sale. Following the approval, the Department of Finance, Bureau of Revenue Collections conducts the bulk tax sale, I think they mean to say opening on October 15th. That has now been rescheduled to today, and that's what we're doing here today. The bulk tax sale takes place every year in October. Sealed bids were due by 11 a.m. on the day of the bulk tax sale, in that case, October 15th, 2025. And all certificates were required to be purchased. They could not be segmented at this time. That means you had to bid on the entire bulk tax sale at that time and by the deadline. Bids were to be received in the office of the City Comptroller, Room 204, City Hall, 100 North Holiday Street. The bids had to be received no later than 11 a.m. on Wednesday, October 15th, 2025. And they are being opened today here in Room 215 at noon, roughly. Late bids will not be accepted. Bids could be submitted by mail, overnight delivery, or in person. Faxed bids could not be accepted, and all bids received would be final. And today, I am here to officially say that we did not receive any bids for the 2025 bulk tax sale. Again, there were no respondents for Finance's 2025 bulk tax sale. Up next, we have, for the Bureau of Procurement, RFQ 000754. This is for a street and park tree inventory. And joining me today to read our bids is Ms. Audrey Quarles, and I believe we have 3 respondents for this RFQ, Aud.
We do. The first bidder is Davy Resource Group, Inc. And I have an original and 2 dupes, and the amount is $1,478,000. That's $1,478,000.
Okay. Audrey, were there any flash drives?
I'm sorry?
Any flash drives?
There's a flash drive
Thank you.
attached.
Okay, that number was 1,478,000.00.
Yes. The next bidder is Arbor Pro, Inc.
Okay,
with a flash drive,
thank you.
an original and 2 dupes. 609,000. That amount again is 609,000.
That was 609,000.00.
Yes.
And I will repeat all of these when we get to the end of the opening.
And our last bidder on this contract is Bisonte, which is BISONTE, Industrial USA, LLC.
Got it.
An original and 2 dupes with a flash drive. And
Audrey, is that the one that had everything marked original? Yes. I want to note it that way. Can you just
Well-
double check that?
Where are you seeing that?
The envelope said original on all. Each one said original, okay.
Well, the envelope.
Yeah.
Okay.
Does the inside say?
Mm-mm.
Or is one marked original and others are marked copy?
No, the original, and I'll tell you which one it is. This is the original.
Okay.
And I have two copies.
So are they distinctly marked or can we not tell?
Well, there, you have an original and 2.
So the reason and I'll just explain
That's
for the
enough.
public too, the reason I ask this question is because we retain a copy for view by the public after bid opening. And if we can't distinctly tell that we have obvious copies that we are easily able to share with the public, we will be sharing one of the originals. So sometimes companies don't want their original shared and they're supposed to provide us copies that are clearly marked copies so that we don't inadvertently share information from a bidder that they may not have wanted to be part of the public record. There's sometimes sensitive information in a bid. So there's always distinctly an original and the number of requested copies from the agency when they put the bid out. So in this case, it sounds like we have one marked original, or we just have 3?
We just have
with
3.
no
None
clear
of these,
mark?
none of these
Okay.
are marked.
So I'm going to follow the, yeah, they all say,
This was probably an original and 2.
yeah, I mean, it probably
Yes, it
is.
is.
I'm going to mark all 3 as originals, and we'll retain one as a copy for the public record. So the bid number?
Okay, and so you mean the bid amount?
Yes,
Is
I'm
$885,500.
And that number?
That's $885,500.
That was 885,500.00.
Yes, and I had a flash drive.
Let's keep those together. Okay, and we have a flash drive and 3 copies of the bid. So I'm going to run through one more time, just for folks who are trying to track what's just occurred. That was Davy Resource Group, Inc. for $1,478,000, Arbor Pro, Inc. for $609,000, and Basante Industrial USA, LLC for $885,500. And that was our final of 3 bidders for RFQ 000754 Street and Park Tree Inventory. And that was our final opening for today. Our next Board of Estimates bid opening is scheduled for December 3rd, 2025 at 12 noon. And thanks everyone for tuning in. Thanks, TV 25.